This is the sort of time when a lot of game review channels on YouTube will release a top 10 games of the year video. But that doesn't work so well for me because I don't tend to play many games close to release. So if I were to try and make a video like that, I probably wouldn't have played many of the best games until after I'd made the video. But I do still like the idea of an occasional list video that lets me talk about multiple games in one go. So this is an idea that I think works better for me, which is games I want you, in general, to play. It's a simple idea, 10 games in this video at least, that I think more people should try out. Every game in this list fits into one of three categories: genuinely excellent games that are popular or not, great games with slightly less mainstream popularity, and hidden gems that deserve more attention. There is a vague method in the ordering of this list. The more niche a game is, for example, the more I want to recommend it, but also I prefer recommending games that are easier for people to play. For example, games that are playable on multiple platforms, in particular PC with a larger player base. So, with that out of the way, let's start the list. Perspective is a 3D/2D puzzle game about navigating a spaceman across two-dimensional levels that you build by moving around in three-dimensional space and changing your perspective of blue and orange objects that the spaceman can interact with in the 3D space. Even just as a premise, Perspective is excellent and a fantastic idea to toy around with. The game's execution matches the quality of the premise. The art direction is simple and clean and feels very much inspired by Portal, and the music used gives a strong sci-fi ambience. The puzzle design is fantastic, and from the very beginning, Perspective throws interesting situations at you that require the player to figure out how the solid core mechanic can be used in new ways to navigate the different obstacles. Moving the spaceman around a corner, or from one side of a room to another, or past a seemingly impenetrable wall of death. It's a game that keeps you thinking but doesn't bog you down with overwhelming difficulty, and the fluid instant switch between 2D and 3D makes experimentation and gameplay a breeze. Perspective is about an hour to 2 hours in length and uses that time brilliantly to show off a range of levels and ideas before ending without overstaying its welcome. Perspective is also free to download and now available on Steam as well as the DigiPen Academy website. If you're a fan of puzzle games, I cannot recommend Perspective enough. Up next is Factorio. Automation and tower defense are two video game elements that are inherently satisfying, where you plan and build a system and then get to watch it continuously operate and bring you rewards. Factorio has both. One is clearly more important than the other. The threat of the native wildlife adds a layer of pressure to your ambitions to expand. After all, the factory must grow, but it's the detail and depth in the design of the automated factory that makes this game shine. The design of your Factorio factory is like an open-world space chem on steroids. There's the logistical puzzle of figuring out what resources need combining to produce new materials, and the spatial puzzle of planning out the conveyor belt's mechanical arms and assemblers. Whether you add bit by bit to your spaghetti factory on the fly or pre-plan a masterpiece of efficient production, the range of materials you need to create and the ever-increasing scale at which you need to be producing new technologies to progress is a constant, stimulating, satisfying and visually stunning challenge. Jokingly called Cracktorio for its addictive gameplay, Factorio is one of the modern masterpieces of indie gaming, and one that you absolutely shouldn't miss out on. Next, similarly to Factorio, Slay the Spire is a game which at its core uses a mechanic that is easy to get right and implements it exceptionally well: deck building. The limited decision space of a deck builder makes these games fast to play. The inbuilt randomness of the draw creates big moments, and the influx of new cards and items is a continuous drip feed of rewards. Slay the Spire takes this solid foundation and builds an exceptionally strong and well-balanced dungeon crawling adventure. It's a game about looking for synergies and strategies from the huge range of cards to turn whichever character you've picked into an unstoppable powerhouse. Combining the cards with the passive abilities of relics you find and the random events and encounters that can appear throughout the dungeon creates a near-perfect strategic tour de force where no two runs are ever the same. Add to that Slay the Spire's gorgeous visuals and the design of the cards and the enemies, and you've got an all-round classic that is easily now the defining game of its genre. The first non-indie game on this list is Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus is arguably one of the greatest video games of all time, and easily in my top 5 games of all time, but not top 5 in this video. I did say that it wasn't just a list of my favourite games. Fumito Ueda's second creation as a game director is a hauntingly beautiful quest into a magic kingdom to save the life of a young girl by defeating 16 powerful colossi. It's a game that almost immediately just feels special. The vast open landscape you have to cross to find the first Colossus is gorgeous, and when you arrive you are immediately struck by the size of the creature. Shadow of the Colossus for me is one of only 2 games that has a sense of the sublime. Facing the Colossi there is an overwhelming sense of scale. It's like a rowing boat in a stormy sea. You feel almost inconsequential in comparison to the size of these monsters you're facing. It's a sense that few, if any, other video games have been able to match and replicate, and as a result, Shadow of the Colossus, its remaster and its remake have been some of the best games released for 3 Sony console generations. Faster Than Light is what I consider an indie classic. Released in 2012, many indie game fans will likely have already played FTL, or at the very least are aware of its existence. Which does somewhat go against the purpose of this list, but Faster Than Light's immense quality makes it well worth mentioning anyway. It's a spaceship captain sci-fi roguelike with an exceptional level of tactical breadth and depth. A marker of good strategy games is how often are you making important decisions that affect the game, and in FTL you are making big decisions all the time. Planning your route through the galaxy in each sector, the macro strategy as you improve your ship through buying upgrades, installing new weapons and hiring crew, and the detailed micromanagement during the real-time with pause combat as you time your weapon firings, target systems and move your crew members around on both your own and the enemy ship. It's a game with constant decisions on multiple levels that all matter when it comes to trying to defeat the final flagship, and on top of all that, it's just an exceptional theme with a god-tier soundtrack by Ben Prunty. FTL is a must-play. Dungeon of the Endless is a genius combination of tower defense, dungeon crawling roguelike, and party-based strategy game. It blows my mind that Dungeon of the Endless doesn't have the same sort of popularity as a game like Faster Than Light or Slay the Spire. On a tall, crashed prison transport, you have to escort a power crystal floor by floor up towards the surface, utilising each floor to gain necessary resources to hold off a variety of deadly monsters hiding in the darkness. Every door you open grants you resources from your generators, but also holds a risk of spawning another wave of monsters from any unpowered rooms. It's another real-time with pause game with a lot of tactical depth. Choosing which party members to stick with, where to build turrets, how many weapons and of which type you need to build to hold off the potential threat without wasting precious resources. Even decisions like which door should you open next are important, and if you found the elevator upwards, when should you make your move and try to leave? It's a game with constant important decisions to make, frequent risk versus reward moments that encourage big and risky plays, and a wide range of solid mechanics that give the game a high skill ceiling to give you a great sense of progress and improvement even after dozens of hours of play. It's a difficult game to win and mocks you with its difficulty levels of easy and too easy. It even has an excellent online co-op mode that removes the pause, turning it into a pure real-time strategy game, which creates a more frantic but still enjoyable mode that you can play with friends. The most recently released game on this list so far is Intergalactic Fishing, a game that I have dubbed No Man's Sky as a small indie fishing game. It's a fishing game in an infinite universe. While it may not look like much on the surface, behind its simple, low-budget visuals, Intergalactic Fishing hides an interesting game with a wonderful premise and solid, satisfying mechanics. The fishing mechanics themselves are fairly simple: click and hold to reel in, release to ease tension on your line. But what makes the game so addictive and engaging is the process that leads you to a bite in the first place. Intergalactic Fishing is a game about exploration and discovery. All species of fish are different in the areas of the lakes they inhabit, the times of day they're most active, and the sort of lure you'll need to catch them. This information is something that you slowly piece together, so each species of fish you find has a satisfying sense of progression attached to it, as you start off needing a little luck to get a bite, but eventually develop an expert knowledge that you can feed back through the game's mechanical systems until you're catching the species with total ease. It's satisfying progression that makes it exciting to go out and explore new lakes, and that all happens in the background behind relaxing visual and sound design and a meditative fishing mechanic. Find new valuable species to improve your fishing gear, find huge fish to challenge other players for the all-time records, or track your progress as you document the universe's already known lakes. Intergalactic Fishing is a genuine hidden gem. Number 3, Rocket League. I did say that this list would favour more niche titles, and Rocket League certainly isn't that. But what it is a genuinely exceptional and free online multiplayer title, and the best sports game ever made. A big reason for that is, unlike major sports sims, your FIFAs, 2Ks, Maddens, etc., Rocket League is not simulating a sport, it is a sport. It doesn't have to abstract ideas from real-life sports. There's no triangle for a through ball, X for a pass to feet. Instead, ideas like passes, dribbles, saves, and shots all emerge out of different uses of the solid core mechanics. Even the concept of attack and defense, which in many sports games are rigidly defined with entirely separate control schemes, only one of which is fun, are just ideas in Rocket League. If the opponent is about to shoot, then they're attacking, but I'm still using the exact same mechanics in my role as a defender. It is a set of rules within a physics engine where you have full control of your character, which is also, in admittedly strange terms, exactly what a real-life sport is. It makes the game so much more interesting when you have to be inventive to get the ball moving in the way you want, and as a result it is so much more rewarding when you pull off something tricky or creative. The mechanics themselves are very strong and give enough room for player control without the game becoming too rigid, and they allow for a huge amount of depth and emergent mechanics that give the game an incredibly high skill ceiling. Having played Rocket League with a lot of people, I don't remember anyone not being noticeably excited by it, even when having absolutely zero mastery of the controls as a complete beginner. And even after playing Rocket League for nearly 5 years now, I still enjoy it regularly, and it's one of my favourite games. This is the best online multiplayer game I've ever played, and it's free. Coming towards the end of the video, the next game on the list is The Floor is Jelly. I should really rename this channel Shilling for The Floor is Jelly, because it feels like that's what I do quite frequently, but it is for a good reason. This game is excellent and far too few people have played it. The Floor is Jelly is a 2D platformer where the floor is made of jelly, and so are the walls or ceilings depending on the layout of the platforms in any particular world. The game's core idea is that you can use the jelly-like nature of your surroundings to navigate the platforms. Surfaces act like trampolines to gain you more height as you jump, and walls have just enough flex for you to climb flat surfaces. While there are some simple puzzle elements in one or two of the game's beautiful minimalist stages, this whimsical platforming is the game's main focus. It deliberately lacks precision, which can add elements of difficulty at times, but The Floor is Jelly isn't a difficult game either. Instead, it's a game that encourages a zen-like trance as you get into a rhythm and flow through its stages. This relaxing mood is aided massively by the game's exceptional soundtrack composed by Disasterpiece, and its wonderfully polished sound design with beautiful dynamic sound elements. The Floor is Jelly is a game that I think less of as just a platformer, and more like a 2-hour-long experience. A game that, while strong mechanically, is more about the relaxing mood that it encourages and the artistic quality in its visuals and sound. It's been one of my favourite indie gems for years now, and it's a game that I definitely think deserves more attention. And finally, speaking of games that feel like 2-hour-long experiences, the most masterful game to fit that description is my final pick: Journey. Journey is a non-verbal walking simulator. It's a game with no dialogue and just a small number of mechanics. The only actions that a player can take being moving, jumping, and singing new life into discarded scraps of cloth. Journey is a genuinely incredible game. The minimalist design with few gamifying features, no text or narration, and no heads-up display creates an immersive world where you only experience what your character experiences. The visual and sound design are incredibly strong, the soundtrack is really good, but the game also knows when to hold back and instead just play the sounds from the environment. While the mechanics may be limited in scope, they are all polished and satisfying. The jumping/flying is majestic, and in my video on Journey I described the sand sliding as the most satisfying movement in any video game I've ever played. And I still stand by that now. I mentioned earlier that Shadow of the Colossus is one of only 2 video games I've ever played with a sense of the sublime. Journey is the other. There's an overwhelming sense of scale, your small character in the vast expanse of desert, your current experience compared to the vast history of an extinct civilization. While most games try to make the player feel powerful, Journey does the opposite. Instead, it emphasizes just how grand and significant the world is around you. The story Journey tells is vague but powerful. The game's title is a reference to the hero's journey, a template that Journey follows in its plot beats to feel familiar with its descent into the unknown. Everything about Journey is made with focus and care and immense quality. It's a game that is beautiful to look at and listen to, but even greater to experience. And only around 2 hours long, available on 2 Sony consoles and now PC as well, this is a game that all video game fans should play. It's also available on iPhones, but I don't think that's the way to play it. Hey, thanks for watching. I wanted to make this video so that I could write short pieces on a variety of games as a change from writing that one long piece on a single game in the last video, and when I came up for the games for this list I wrote down far more than 10, so I'll almost certainly add at least a part 2 to this in the future. If you have any questions about the games I picked, games I haven't picked, or the order that I put them in, feel free to ask me in the comments. I did say there was a method to the madness, and while I'm not completely attached to it, I did have a reason for this order. The next video will be back to looking at a single game, and hopefully I'll see you there. Goodbye.